item on the agenda, consider approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held on August 9th, 2018. Are there any changes, additions, or corrections?
No.
Not, they stand approved as presented.
Next item is the financial statement.
This is a summary of revenue and expenditure activities for the City of Hayes, month ended July 31, 2018. The revenues in July totaled $2,920,725. That's an increase of $326,000 compared to this period last year. Some notable areas of increased revenue: airport improvement revenue increased $439,627. That's due to FAA reimbursements on the airport fence and also the taxiway I projects. And given the rain, water consumption has slowed a little. Month to date, residential and business water consumption is up only 1.97%. Revenue for both is up 5.8. Month to date conservation revenue is up 14.6. And year to date consumption is up 3.3 with total revenue up 9.35. One item of revenue decrease, franchise fees for general government revenues is off $29,700. That's simply due to a timing of receipts on one franchisee. Expenditures in July total $2,013,975. That's an increase of $370,995. A few notable increases. You may have noticed a credit in fleet maintenance expenditures from a year ago. That was due to insurance claims on hail damage from the June 17 storm. We had received in excess of $68,000 for damages, mostly on vehicles. Otherwise, fleet maintenance was up about $14,000 when compared to 17. As reported last month, expenditures for intergovernmental were up about $220,000 due to the timing of invoice for insurance. New equipment increased $48,000 for the purchase of a dump truck, and water reserve expenditures rose $80,000 due to water line improvements on East 10th. A couple of notable decreases in expenditures. Contingency for airport improvement fell $19,885 due to the purchase of a paint sprayer at this time last year. And public safety equipment was off $19,700 for the purchase of replacement mobile radios, fire department RIT packs, vests and carriers, as well as new vehicle setup equipment for the police department. Month to date, general fund sales tax collections were at $608,764. That's a decrease of $12,646, or -2% as compared to last year. Year to date, general fund collections are at $4,132,036, up $6,415, or just 0.16%. The report of quarter-to-date sales tax collections by industry classification was up $16,557, or 0.87. The portfolio certificates of deposit on July 31, 2018 totaled $52.95 million, with a weighted average interest rate of 1.82%, up 0.85 from a year ago. Our value on the portfolio of Treasury notes was $7.707 million, still with a weighted average yield to maturity of 1.78. Total balance of the money market account on July 31 was $2 million, with a current yield of 0.5. Total investments are up $1.557 million when compared to this time last year.
I'll move that we approve the July 2018 financial report.
Second. Go ahead.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Musil, second by Commissioner Melick. Any comments or questions on the report? No. Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Financial statement 5-0. Any non-agenda citizen comments tonight? Seeing none, next item is the consent agenda with some approvals and recommendations.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Schwaller, second by Commissioner Jacobs. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next item is a progress report on the wastewater treatment facility.
All right, good evening. My name is Eric Farrow. I'm with HDR, and I am the on-site engineer for the city over at the wastewater treatment plant improvements. I think it's notable, so I'll just point out that I've called Hayes my second home for more than a year now, and we are about 13 months or so into the project with about just as much to go. You'll see tonight, I'll present some of the construction update and then speak a bit about how things are going with the city staff and between the design builder and the city staff out at the plant. There's definitely a third dimension, and we're putting finishing touches on certain areas at the plant. So just a quick status report first. We kicked off the project about, on May 31st of 2017 when we issued the notice to proceed. And we have the contract dates listed there too, with the partial substantial completion towards the end of November this year, with substantial August next year, and final September next year. Some of the financials, the contract price has remained what it was in the beginning, around $28.4 million. No change orders to date. And then the contract days remaining as of today are 388. And we continue to get schedule updates from the contractor monthly, but at the very bottom, the most recent schedule that we have from the contractor is a July 15th completion next year. So
That's wonderful.
that means we're less than 1 year from that. So I'll present some of the pictures provided courtesy of the city drone. You see a nice shot of the plant overview here about a week ago. And things move really quickly, and our bi-monthly updates would oftentimes have a complete new structure, but the structures that you see there now are the structures that are going to be there in the end. So everything from the head of the plant up here with the new influent pump station to the headworks that is a complete second level now with a roof on it, down to the aeration basin, the splitter box and final clarifiers, the new filter building sitting behind the brick building you see here, and then the UV and admin area there in the brick. So that focuses on the liquid side, which corresponds to the partial substantial completion on the schedule. And just a couple of months from now, we'll be looking at getting new wastewater into those new structures at startup. So I'll just go over a couple of the structures. The headworks overview here, you can look down on it and see the two levels. But the finishing touches that I mentioned are going to be the roofing, obviously, and then things like just simple things like the doors, etc. So the process equipment is going in there too. So it's really come along nice, irregardless of the wet weather that we've had in the last few months. The crews have, commend them for continuing their work out there. It has been muddy, but definitely workable. So electrical improvements where Midwest Energy came out to the site and ran a new transformer that'll power the electrical building that you see on the opposite side there. So that'll continue out into the plant too. Here's a look into that second level where the raw wastewater will come in and hit the screen. So this is the first process equipment. It's a rotary drum screen and a micro screen, so it'll be a more effective screening process to what the plant currently has now.
Chicken water now.
The aeration basin was what I called the prized possession at my last update, and that was really due to just the simple size of it. So we are starting to fill that 185 foot diameter structure with equipment. So things that go in are mixers. You can see the black impellers here. The mixing, they will provide some of the mixing to the basin, and then the walkway here that'll have diffusers mounted on there. So this is really where the treatment happens, at the aeration basin. And if you get the chance to come out in the next couple of months, you can really see for yourselves the sheer size of it, and we'll continue to be filling this thing with process equipment. So this is a really good time to see it go into place. Just a different angle, but looking at a similar spot in the plant. We have flow coming from the aeration basin over to the splitter box, which is now up and getting things, miscellaneous metals like grating and handrails, weir gates, and things like that. Flow will go to that splitter box and then continue on to the final clarifiers. And those clarifiers, a lot of the mechanisms are going in. So this really starts to make the wastewater treatment plant look like more than just tanks sitting around, obviously. So those complexities are really starting to take shape. We're not quite to the point where we're testing the equipment out yet. We've tested the tanks and the pipes and things to make sure that those are within specifications, but then the process equipment will be one of the next items. Next up is a close-up of that final clarifier mechanism. You see this feed wells and scraper arms and things like that that the water will flow through. And this is a look down into one of the basements at the plant, just to give you an example of the process piping. The majority of the piping, by and large, is buried underground out in the yard at the wastewater plant, but some of it will be in the form of this exposed piping that you see here. So this is what we call the recycle activated sludge and the waste activated sludge pump station, where we'll be pumping some of the solids. This is an overview of a couple facilities. You have the new filter building that is installed as a new metal fabricated building, which houses, has 2 bays there, and one of the 2 bays houses the new filter equipment that has a micro screen in it, and then flow will continue there. I won't be showing any pictures of the UV area today, but the UV area does sit into this middle portion of that building, and where the UV modules or the ultraviolet modules will provide disinfection to the wastewater. So that really completes the liquid train of the plant improvements, and in the next couple of months we'll be looking at testing that equipment and starting it up. Then beyond that will be the solids train, and we'll of course be back for an update in 2 months, and I'm sure we can share some of that with you then. So improvements have also been made to the admin area. This is starting to look like a finished space, an office space that'll have the offices, but also the lab space and the control room and mud room, break room, that type of thing. But it's looking very nice. The new entrance doors were put on today, so you start to get a sense for what the finished product's going to look like when that happens. Since our last update, work has started out at the golf course where M&D has begun some of the excavation. This is one area or aspect of the project that weather has impacted us. We've continued work out at the plant, but due to the almost weekly weekend showers that we've been receiving, the golf course is in great shape, but that also means that the pond where we need to do some work is full of water. So the city has, in multiple attempts, been pumping down the water that's accumulated. This is obviously a shot from when it was dry, but that pond is full today. And with some dry weather, we hope to get out there. The contractor M&D is just needing 1 to 2 weeks to really get things in a position where we can start putting the final touches on that pond expansion. So that pond will provide additional storage capacity for the reuse water, and then ultimately irrigation to the golf course too. So it's nice to finally break ground and get out there what we thought was going to be a great time to do that work. So I just wanted to mention how things are starting to work between the design builder and the city, just to give an update on that relationship, because I think it's important to the end product that the city's really getting, because the infrastructure is my favorite thing to present an update on, and it looks nice, but we're getting to the point where we have things like operation and maintenance manuals being developed. We have SCADA, which is the controls to the plant, getting developed. And the city has been very forward from the beginning in what their asks are, and I think that the design builder has been to deliver on that so far with just general layout and operations of the plant, so that the staff is trained when we have that liquid startup going, and then they are prepared when the first maintenance item comes up, which I'm sure they're excited for. So it's coming together in that sense as well, both at on the construction level and on the final operations side too. Our next update will be in October, so that will be right around that time that we're doing a startup. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Good.
Yeah, very good update, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Sure.
Next item is a Unified Development Code fence height and accessory structure height regulations.
Good evening, Jesse Rohr, Director of Public Works. So this item is actually two items I'm going to talk about, but it's one action item if you decide to approve this recommendation tonight. We're talking about two different UDC or Unified Development Code regulations, one being fence height and the other being accessory structure height. First on the fence height, and a little bit of background, this current language that we're talking about was adopted when the UDC was adopted in August of 16. And as we started utilizing that code, we just didn't feel that that particular code met the intent of what we were trying to achieve, and just find it a little bit overly and probably unnecessarily restrictive. And in both these items tonight I'll talk about, it's a lot easier to describe in pictures, so a lot of pictures to show you, and I think it's easier to see what we're trying to change. So in the image here, if you can imagine this right here being a corner residential lot with a street on two sides, the area we're talking about is right here, or what's known in the UDC as the side, or the street side yard, or the side of the house. That's not the front. So in these images here, you can see the red line that indicates the height of the fence that's allowed under current regulations. So if this fence were to be built today under current regulations, it can only be 42 inches tall, or approximate height of the red line shown there, rather than the 6 foot as indicated on the image. Again, here's a current aerial image, and the yellow line indicates where current regulations would allow a standard residential 6 foot fence to be built. This particular property actually went through a Board of Zoning variance case back in July. The Board of Zoning did ultimately approve the variance, and it kind of set the stage for us to come forward and ask for a regulation change. Without a variance, the fence was only allowed to be built at 42 inches at the location of the blue line. However, the homeowner, like most homes within the city, wished to build it in the location of where that blue line indicates, or on the property line on the side yard of the house, at the 6 foot rather than the 42 inches, or 3.5 foot. So again, just another image here. Obviously the red, the 42 inches, shows what could be built, and the yellow with the 6 foot marking indicates what could be built if you choose to change the regulations here tonight as recommended. Here in this image is an example of a fence that is compliant with current regulations, because it is a minimum 15 foot back from the property line. On this property, this post here at the edge of the alley entrance actually indicates the property pin on this property. Without any sort of variance or anything, the best they could do is make it where this one was located. They could not build it out to the property line, and that's what we're trying to allow with the proposed regulations. So as mentioned, the proposed language that we're asking for would allow the 6 foot tall fence to be erected upon the street side yard. Site triangle regulations would still apply. If there's site issues coming out of alleys or street corners, they would still apply. There's another section of ordinance that deals with those, as they always have. And we do anticipate future variances with the Board of Zoning if the regulation is left unchanged.
Hey, Jesse?
Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. We are currently allowing 6 foot. I mean, that was before we changed the code, right? 6 foot fences. That's
You
what
can
we-
do 6 foot fences, you just can't build them where
Side yard.
Side yard.
Or,
Right.
No, what he's asking is, before the code was adopted, you could do the
Right.
6 foot
Yes,
fence out
you
like
Yeah,
that.
that's
Right.
what, yeah,
Yes,
okay, that's
exactly.
what I thought.
And when was this code adopted?
August of 16, so about 2 years ago.
Where did we ever get that 42 inch?
it was part of a big, well, we received a very large
That's what I
3-ring binder. And it had everything from commercial to residential and kinds of neighborhoods. And actually, we didn't. It was all digital. We said, well, don't worry, there's not going to be a book anymore. And I picked this out among some other things. I said, this is going to be a problem.
And here it is.
Yep.
And also, we also dictate what they can and can't use to make a fence.
A lot of that was actually removed from the code as well. It started out, you couldn't have chain link and different things.
Well,
That was all
you also
stripped
couldn't use
from the code.
structural metal, so you couldn't do something beautiful,
Yeah.
sculptural.
Yeah, this
It
was.
just looks, I mean, it just seems silly to me.
Yeah.
I don't know how it got by us.
When you do a big update like that, I think that we all knew that when we passed it, that we're gonna have to come back and
Right.
fix
And we
some
already
of
said
this
that.
stuff.
We
Yeah,
said
we
that.
knew that when we passed it.
Yeah.
We had a couple back to you, I think, back in this past spring, and.
Right.
And, there could be more in the future, but hopefully very few, if any, but. So, if there's no more question on fences, I'll talk about accessory structures a little bit. So again, the language we're talking about was also adopted at the same time in August of 16. And the way it's written, it's difficult to understand, it's difficult to enforce. And the intent is there, but as written, the wording just, like I say, it doesn't meet the intent, and neighborhood conservation has been an issue. One thing the code talks about now, it brings in the number of stories that a garage can be relative to height, and we have found that to be completely unnecessary. We don't care if it's 1 story, 2 story, 3 stories, if all we're caring about is the overall height of the structure. So currently a 2-story detached accessory structure can be up to 24 foot tall. Often, it's difficult to determine whether a structure is single story or 2-story, and I'll show you some pictures here in a minute. Currently, regulations allow you to build a single story detached garage no more than 18 feet tall. So I'll get into the pictures and be a little bit easier to understand. So here's some examples from around town. This property is compliant with current regulations. It is over 18 foot tall, however, it is a 2-story garage, and it's also not taller than the house. So as a 2-story, it can be 24 foot tall or as tall as the house. This would also be compliant with the proposed regulations regardless of height, because again, it's not taller than the residential structure on the lot. Some of you recall when we developed the UDC that we wanted regulations in there dealing with height. We had height issues on accessory structures for a lot of years, and it was something specifically asked for in the right of the UDC. This is something we're trying to avoid, and this was the intent of the UDC regulations, that would not allow accessory structures that are significantly taller than surrounding homes. This garage here is approximately 10 foot taller than the house on the same lot. For the recommended change, this would also not be allowed. 18 foot tall would be the maximum height allowed without a variance. I do want to mention that a variance through the board zoning would always be available if someone proposed to build a garage taller than 18 foot and their house wasn't tall enough to allow it. This also would not be compliant with proposed regulations. Again, 18 foot would be the maximum height allowed. This one's approximately 23 feet tall. This garage, however, would be compliant with proposed regulations. It's only approximately 16.5 feet. So again, the proposed language would allow an accessory structure to be 18 foot tall or the height of the house, whichever is greater. The number of stories would be completely irrelevant and removed from the code. Just like we talked about the fences, we feel if we leave the language as it is, future variances will be likely. We're trying to avoid having people go to the board of zoning for variances whenever possible. However, at discussions with staff and planning commission, and all the way back to the development of UDC, we always felt that a height regulation of some type is still desired. So the options we're bringing to you tonight, you could approve an ordinance that amends the UDC regulations as proposed pertaining to the fence and the accessory structure regulations. You could propose other changes or variances to that, or make no changes and leave them as they are. With that, I would take any questions, and if I need to go back to any images or anything, I can do that as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve ordinance number 3957, amending fence height regulations and accessory structure height as proposed and recommended by staff and the Hayes Area Planning Commission.
Second?
I have a motion by Commissioner Smaller, seconded by Commissioner Musil. Any more questions or discussion?
Jesse, I think this is easier for lay people to understand, so that, we won't be having that confusion on how high, you can do. Just cleans up the whole ordinance.
Right, we agree.
I would agree with that. And I remember when Commissioner Swaller brought up the fence. I remember having that discussion, and it was, like you said, that thick, and we had said that we figured there'd be some things would come back, and it kind of, when you brought this up last week, I was kind of shocked that we didn't catch it, especially on the fence, because it just makes sense. But I think this is a good change, and hopefully it'll be good for the developers also.
Okay, with that, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next item. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse.
Commissioner Miller, anything to add tonight?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to take the wastewater treatment plant tour today. It was very interesting. I was amazed on how complex it is. I was amazed on how large some structures were. I mean, they needed to be that size, and then how technology has evolved and how other structures were so much smaller than what I had envisioned it. But it's coming along. It's complicated, but it's well worth a tour.
I just want to remind everybody of the Fall Gallery Walk tomorrow. It's today Thursday, tomorrow's Friday.
Right.
Downtown, and the pavilion, the city's pavilion, is going to have wonderful music throughout the whole evening, so we hope you find the opportunity to stop.
Mayor, I was just gonna ask, is this the time we have the nursing students do a recap of tonight's meeting like we normally do?
Yes,
No,
it is.
no, okay. On a serious note, I want to ask Mr. Crispin, and I appreciate the updates you give us on the ton of leaks you've been having and what your staff has been doing. As I drove by 22nd today, it seemed like a very large leak. And I know some of that's been caused by the work we're doing on the water tower. On these leaks, is it stuff that was gonna happen soon, or is it just, or do you even know?
Well, good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Crispin, Director of Water Resources.
And I apologize for putting you on the spot.
No, that's a great question, and it's things that we've been talking together as staff quite frequently. You know, we've had a lot of rain. So one of the things is the ground shifts quite a bit with the rain that we've had. A lot of moisture, that happens as well when you have no rain. So if you look around the country right now, a lot of folks are dealing with that in a lot of cities. The other thing that we're dealing with right now is the project where the water tower is being remediated and repainted. Luckily, we're pretty close on that project. The system basically is set up that not only is that a source of water for us, but it also helps regulate pressures in the system. So you do have situations where sometimes there are leaks that you do find, and you know, that's just part of our infrastructure that we deal with. But luckily, our crew is quick to respond to those leaks.
Yeah.
And we get on scene, and you have to call in locates to get people out to, before you start digging. So our first response is to try to stop the water from flowing, and that also takes people at the water plant to slow things down and make sure that we provide water for our citizens. The other thing is, obviously right now without that tower, some of the pressures in town are a little bit difficult. And so we're hoping that this next week, that with that tower, we should be back in service. But to put that tower back in service, there's been a lot of questions. Why is the tower empty? In order to remediate lead and to repaint that tower, you actually have to have it empty, because while they were remediating it, you don't want water, you don't want anything getting into the water, so it has to be empty. The other thing about that tower is to paint it, you can't paint a tower with it full of water, because it actually sweats, even if it was 110 degrees out. So those are two key points, that it does have to be empty. And we have one tower on south of I-70, so that is our one equilibrium of pressure. So it's a unique situation.
Yeah.
That's funny about the pressure, because for the last few weeks, I keep running outside to make sure I don't have anything running, you know, my sprinkler or anything is on,
right.
because I've noticed that and didn't even think that would be the cause.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is a unique situation, and quite frankly, like I said, there is a lot of situations in not just the United States, but you look at the state of Kansas, and there's water main breaks in Topeka, Wichita. A lot of folks are dealing with it, but right now
Seems
got a
we've
couple
had our
things
share,
going on,
yeah.
so. But staff has done a wonderful job, but I believe over this next couple of weeks we'll get through this one project that'll help us out tremendously.
What amazes me, how, I mean, not only your department, but other departments, how I can go by a leak or a hole you have in the morning, and by afternoon, you guys have got it filled
Well,
in,
Gone.
doing your best.
And I do want to point out too, and I've made this very clear, that we tend to make a mess, and Public Works comes behind
Yeah,
us and
yeah,
helps
absolutely.
us, and it's been taking a lot of time to get back and clean up some of those
Mhm.
leaks, so sometimes we go from one to another, and they've obviously have projects they're working on too, so
Yeah.
we're getting to those as quick as we can.
Well, you know, I get, and we all do over the years, people say, oh, you know, I went by and there's 7 guys, you know, with a shovel, you know, standing around. But you know what? I mean, within hours, it's taken care of, and it just amazes me how fast they do it. And I appreciate it, because you guys have been dealing with some.
An average leak takes around 4 hours.
really-
I've actually had citizens comment on
Oh,
how
yeah.
quickly we seem to be getting that done.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jeff. Sorry about putting you on the spot.
Well, it's pretty clear to us, we had 2 presentations last week on individuals, groups that want to adopt a park and make some changes. And this is not new, and it's something that's probably going to continue. It's a change in our society, that people want neighborhood parks that have features and things that they think are important for their part of the community. And unfortunately, we have not been able to work with those groups. We've kind of pushed them off on the Parks Director, and we've not given them, anyone, some guidance. This is what we look for when we're developing a park, whether we're adding a restroom or play equipment or a multi-million-dollar project. This is what we're looking for. And so I have asked, and I'm asked tonight, officially the city manager and staff to put together a policy, so not an ordinance, but a policy on how we would handle requests for park improvements in the future, ranging from simple benches, restrooms, play equipment, to, again, a pretty substantial overhaul. One of the things I think would be critical that's addressed in this future policy is how are we going to maintain the property? We have a budget that is so focused on staying lean. Our biggest expense is people in our organization, not only their compensation, but their benefits. And of course, we've got a lot of expensive equipment too, but the ongoing operation of the city requires people. And the Parks Department's a fairly lean department, given all the acreage we have to maintain, including parks. So I would request that any policy that we adopt going forward would say that a group that adopts a park would put funds into the city in reserve so that we can maintain their improvements into the future. And of course, I'm just only one of 5, so as this develops, I want everyone's input on this so that we can treat every group that comes here fairly, and they know what they're gonna get in advance. Because I think last week it was a little difficult, and we were trying to feel our way here, and I just don't want to have a repeat of that again.
I think understanding the fiscal note, as I said last week, is so important, and I really didn't understand that fully until I became, 1, a city commissioner, and 2nd, having been involved in the building of the pavilion with Downtown Hayes Development Corporation. When you put that final number to it, it's a living, breathing number that's go on for years to come. It doesn't just end. And I was expressing that last week. I think particularly the ARC had a great presentation. However, I'm not sure, it wasn't a lot of anecdotal in terms of what it's going to take to go forward with it.
Right.
So
Well,
I
and
appreciate the comment.
And this isn't the first time we've dealt with this. You know, it wasn't that long ago we had a group come in here with the idea of the horseshoe
Yep.
tournament
Right.
area,
Right.
and that was going to be a very maintenance intensive
Yep. Absolutely.
thing. And I mean, now Jeff had gone out of his way, I think, to make it as, to need the least maintenance possible.
Right.
If it would have moved forward, but I mean, still, it's gonna need maintenance. Nothing takes no maintenance. And so this isn't something new. I mean, honestly, I think this is something that probably, if we're all honest, has been in the back of our minds
Exactly.
for a long time.
I would agree, and I think there should be a policy, because there was numerous things that was brought up last week that I kind of sat back and I didn't think about that. But like you said, for the future, this will cost everything we build. But I also don't want to have a policy in place to where it stops people from wanting to
Right.
grow our
Absolutely.
community.
Absolutely.
So
Right.
I
and
think we do.
I feel like in a way, we kind of already had an unofficial policy, or at least I always felt like it was an unofficial policy, because when I think back to when we put in the new playground equipment in Kiwanis Park, it was kind of a
dollar for dollar matching fund.
Yeah.
You know, that was what was always tossed out there, but I don't think it was ever written down. I think it was just, oh, that's just what we've always done, you know, kind of a thing.
Having been a part of presentations, I will tell you that having a guidance of a policy makes the job of the person doing the presentation so much easier.
They know what to
because
expect.
Everything's laid out ahead of time.
Yeah.
They can have the answers in that. I appreciate the suggestion that we move down that road.
Has there been, what kind of time, when is this gonna get put on an agenda? Have you guys had
I'd
that
like us to
discussion?
discuss it by February of next year at our retreat. I think
That's
that
a
would be
good
a
idea.
good time.
Oh.
Give them time to
Yep.
Okay.
hash it out. Where there's no rush. Here's a fun fact that most people don't know, and that is there's no park in the city of Hayes that was built by the city. We have not built or paid for any parks on our own. They've either been donated ground by developers or others, and then service groups have contributed the equipment, the benches, and so forth. Now, we put in turf and irrigation systems and things like that.
And sidewalks and everything, the
Correct.
occasional restroom.
Right.
Yeah.
Other than that, this has been a community effort, and so to continue this going, even municipal park was put in by the federal government.
Right.
We'd had nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
So this tells folks going forward, if you want to help us, this is what we're looking for. And then there's an expectation and no one leaves this chamber disappointed.
Right.
One thing, if I could add, there's other, not just parks, but stuff that we have built in this community. I'd like to see if we could maybe have a policy to where, where we can add to what we have, not just, the upkeep. Maybe we can make it better in the next 5 to 10 years, have some kind of, whether it's the sports complex, which we've talked, shade features and stuff. I'm just saying that's one thing I think about. Instead of just somebody always coming up with a brand new idea, add to what we already have to make it
It's a
better.
great retreat.
I would
discussion.
think
Yeah.
that the sports, in my mind, the sports complex would be a part of this
Yeah.
discussion.
Absolutely,
for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's
And
great.
just so you guys know, one of the things that we're working on internally, and we were planning on having this ready for you guys to discuss in the wintertime, is, and this was brought up, I think, when you guys were discussing the initial budgets. We are in the process of, we know how many swing sets we have, and we know how many shelter houses we have and restrooms and all of that. But what I've asked the parks director to do is to start to put together a depreciation schedule. So
Good.
if you have 15 restrooms, and on average, a restroom will last 20 years, then how much you need to set aside each year to replace those restrooms. It's like our vehicle and equipment reserve schedule we have. Shelter houses, playground equipment, which is extremely expensive, as you know. And so we want to provide, we need that information to be able to look long-term, but you need it to look long-term. But the commission also seemed to be leaning towards a discussion on those remaining parks that weren't fully stocked with amenities.
Right.
So I'm talking playground equipment, shelter houses, restrooms, other things like that. We do have some parks that aren't there yet, and some that are. So what do we want those parks to look like? Do all parks need to have the same amenities, or is it okay to have parks with different amenities? And that would tie in with the sports complex and golf
Right.
course and everything else that is part of our public amenities. And so, but without having the first question answered, you guys really can't have a substantive discussion on the second issue. And then I think a policy would fit in with both of those matters.
Well, and I think that the other part of this is a little bit of a history as to, Commissioner Schwaller pointed out, a lot of this has been given to the city, and I think if you look over the past 25 to 50 years, the amount of acreage that the parks have grown has been exponential to the actual growth as far as population
Yeah.
and even land area of the city. And not only has the acreage been exponential, but the amenities have also been exponential.
Yep.
And that, I'm not just talking about regular parks. Look at the sports complex and the pool and everything else that we maintain. The standard of what the community expects is no longer a swing set for $500. It's a complete playground build out for $50,000. So,
Right.
But I think it's an easier discussion when you have so much that's given to the city. We don't have to start all over from anything, and I think that's important. I don't want this discussion to it's a where do money come from discussion. It really is for the future. We're going to have to identify how we're going to do it, and I just don't want us to pull back so much that I personally get uncomfortable, and I don't think that's your suggestion at all, Henry.
Not at all. To
Well,
facilitate more
right,
investment.
yeah.
right.
definitely.
But I think the key thing is sustainability on our budget.
Right.
That's because there's no no free lunch.
Where did
And
money
so,
come from?
you know, it's easy to be given something, but then to maintain it, but we don't want to wreck our budget, and that's something that city staff, as well as this city commission and past city commissions, have looked at, is sustainability in our budget and not get down the road 5-10 years and have to start laying people off or have to start increasing the mill levy. And that's probably the biggest thing, is being able to afford these things and not have to wreck our budget or raise the mill levy.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay,
Good
we'd
stuff.
be happy to put something together and bring it back.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Welcome to the nursing students.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for coming. You picked a good night. Be nice to your pharmacist. Your professional life will be a lot easier on you. Okay, with that, we're adjourned. Yeah, he changed the green